Hey guys, I thought I'd do a bit of an episode on improving a drawing without grinding. So, without unnecessary practice, where you're doing so much practice every day that you're doing like 100 figure drawings or, um, so many million faces, or you're getting references up um, and then redrawing those references a million times and trying to memorize every single aspect of something that you're drawing. Like, for example, you're trying to draw trees and backgrounds and every single thing that you might ever draw. And you're probably going to be starting off and say your tree, you're just going to, oh, here's my tree. Yay. And so practicing the tree, you're like, well, how do I make that a little bit better? And you'd be like, oh, I forgot branches and that sort of thing. And so practicing a bunch of something that's not what you want it to be is just practicing something that like isn't going to work anyway. So there's no point practicing bad technique or technique that it, you don't want it to be. And 90% of your practice time, if you're not very good yet, is probably going to be really poor. So you're kind of in a situation, a catch-22, when you're first starting out drawing, where uh, all the practice that you're doing, like most of it, like all this practice is going to be really poor practice, and maybe there's like a little bit that's a sweet spot where you're learning something and you're gaining something, and it's also pretty good practice. And so a lot of people that have been doing things for like 5 years, 10 years, something like that, they're going to tell you, practice more. But their practice is going to be in this sweet spot. Your practice is going to be in this terrible spot most of the time. So, how do you get around this problem when you're first learning to draw? How do you get around the idea that your practice is going to be terrible, so you're not going to draw? Uh, you're not going to gain experience just like everyone else, because if you draw in faces like, here's a face, oh, now I need to put an eye on it, oh, there's a Loomis method, I'm going to use the Loomis method, like, how do I draw this face? It's like a third there, and then they're halfway down the third, and then like, this is like a third of the eye, and this is a third of the eye, and then the ears and the half, and then like this thing goes. Oh my God, it's so horrible. Like that's just gonna key you into the wrong kind of mentality, because, as I said in the first episode, method is a big part of drawing. So you don't just draw something right away and have it look amazing. So you don't even need, like, oh, you're drawing a tree. You don't need this tree to look amazing if you've got a method that gets you towards drawing a tree. So, for example, you understand the form of the tree, you understand like what kind of design you want for the tree. So, obviously, you don't want this design. You might want something that's like a bit more like an oak tree. So, it might have like a wider base and like a broader branch system. And you start to think about like, well, how do they represent themselves? Like these how do these trees kind of like represent themselves, and what is it that's so amazing about an oak tree? And you ask those questions and things like that, you can draw something pretty terribly just using stroke and um, thinking about the design and whatever that is, and how you can make something look special. And you can slowly push it towards a nice tree. Like there's no problem with you doing that. You could definitely do that. But you're going to come up against a couple obstacles. One of them is speed. You're not going to have a lot of speed, so you're probably going to just be doing it slow, and then when you look for something like, oh, I want this oak tree to do this thing and then this thing, and oh God, how should I remove this? Is this a good line or a bad line? It doesn't look like a right line, but he says to push that, to keep pushing things, so maybe I should keep it. You know, those kinds of uncertainties are things that slow you down. And so speed is a big thing. And it's a big thing in my style. So I want to draw manga and I want to draw stories. And stories are better the faster you can tell them. So if you can tell a story nice and fast, you can tell more of the story, which is just brilliant because then it removes your limit. So you're going to want to focus on some aspects of speed. And a lot of people are going to say, no, learn slow, because if you learn slow, then you're going to get it right. And they're kind of right, because, the percentage of your practice, this is the only bit that's going to count. But the other way to look at it is, if all this is your practice, then you better use a lot of speed so that this comes back to this, and then this is all good stuff. So if you're going to use speed, you can use speed and you can be reckless, just so that you get a larger proportion of your practice being good in the long run. That's going to help you more than if you're assuming or pretending like you're some skilled person right now and that this is enough, because it's not going to be enough. So you want to focus on some aspects of speed. Another thing is, I call it kind of like the crumpled paper effect. So say you have like a piece of paper and it's kind of, I don't know, crumpled up at its edges, whatever. And I don't know, there's like a figure on here, but it's crumpled up. You can't like see it because it's in this paper that, you gotta straighten it back out before it actually makes any sense. So you straighten out this paper, bop, and then there's the figure, but you can't see that because it's all crumpled. This is something I call force. So your thought speed, your thought force. So this is solving certain problems, like little things, like how do you cross relationship, like maybe the top half of a drawing and like the bottom corner of a drawing. How do you like connect these up so that then you get the thing that you want to get? There's going to be lots of little problems, even in like your stroke, because your stroke lines, they usually represent themselves as kind of like a star. So you're going to get biomechanical problems that come up like here, 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 here. Um, So if you don't kind of solve those problems for like, oh, actually, I have to like change my position to draw this thing. Okay, I'll change my position to draw that thing. If you can't make that leap in judgment, you can't straighten things out. And so everything will be wonky. And if everything's all wonky, this is just about making a difficult choice. And you can search for what that difficult choice is, and you can kind of get used to the idea of what difficult choices are. Um, Speedy choices, you just kind of like pop in, do something quick, come out, pop in, pop out, pop in, pop out, and you'll see me doing this in the drawing process where I might create something and then I'll do like some searching lines, and then like I'll use a stroke, and then I'll say like, oh, okay, so now I'm going to create like a secondary form, and here's the secondary form, and let's create another sort of primary form of the eye, and then here's the secondary form of that eyelid, and here's another one, and then we put like an iris on, and voila, and now you got like, oh, sort of an eye, because it's just the forms of an eye, and it's there. And oh, look, we've got this separation between here and separation between the center line, and then I can create like the nose that comes off underneath here, and uh, I'll create like a stroke line that kind of creates the form of the face, along with like the angle. And so I'll be popping in, popping out, popping in, popping out. And this is like, I'm doing this really fast. And that is how I'm actually doing something more accurately than someone that would just be like, okay, and here's the face. Oh, I got that wrong. And then, he, and then I go across like this, right? Like, don't do things in ones. Don't do them in ones. Do them in at least twos. So this is like a thing that like lots of artists learn, is that they'll just kind of like create two lines, or like this and then this, and they'll just kind of like do things in two. Like it might be that they'll be doing one curve here and then one curve here, or one curve here and one curve here, or something. So like this. So it'll be slightly changing the curve, or uh, the alignment of what you're doing. This helps you get a bit more speed, uh, and helps you drop back in and out of things. Your force, you want to, when you're getting all this wonkiness and stuff, that's a big part of this is measurement. So learning how to measure properly and learn ratios. But another part of it is um, knowing the problem that you're trying to solve. So just dropping back and stopping, being very plodding in your thinking, just think it through. What is this step? What is that step? What is this step? What is that step? If it takes you like a really long time and is really hard, that just shows that you don't have big muscles in this yet. And so you've got to try more until all of a sudden, you know, you're feeling quite strong at doing that. And once you're really strong at doing this kind of thing, you can make things that will start to be triangulated well, be reasonably good in their measurement and their form, and then will represent themselves nicely. The next thing I want you to understand is fitness. So, in my previous episode, I was just drawing for an hour and no problem, no sweat. Like, say if you're going to go jogging for an hour, you're probably going to start to sweat. So, what you want to focus on is a degree of fitness. And this is where a lot of people would say you definitely have to practice or you definitely have to grind. And they're also wrong. Um, so, with fitness and developing a degree of fitness, this is about, say, uh, you you jump in, you jump out, you jump in, you jump out, you jump in, you jump out of all these different things, and that takes mental effort. It's not easy to do that, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And when you're doing mental focus and force, th- this is difficult to do as well. Like, to make sure you're doing it right and at the right consistency, the right timings, for the right length of time, so you're not getting too bogged down. That can be a very big challenge. But then when it comes to fitness, you're doing this a lot. So you're jumping in and doing something. Oh, I'll do this thing that does this thing, which then does this thing. And then, oh, maybe I'll design the eye shape so that it's kind of a rhombus. And then maybe I'll like um, make them angry, or hyper focused, or something. Okay, there we go. And if I want it angry, maybe we'll tilt it up, and like you're doing some thought speed thing there, right? Where you're designing, but you're using the ability to like jump in and out to create what you're creating. That's speed. And then any problem that you come up against where it's just not working, or you're not getting the measurements right or something like that, well, then you have to focus on this force thing. Like maybe you have to focus on the ratios and say like, well, what ratios do I want, and how do I want to focus on this, and what angle am I actually using, and what's the question here? Why isn't this working? Um, and then you could think on that, you could figure it out and break that down. Cool. But if you're kind of weak on these things, you're only going to be able to do that once or twice or three times, and then you're just going to be like, tuck it out. You're just going to be like, oh my God, I'm dead. I'm dead. And you're just going to starfish on the floor, and your pen's going to roll out of your hand. And you just, it's a murder scene. You're done. And in order to get fitness better, you need to be just super aware of what makes you super tired and learn to budget it. Learn to budget it and understand what your limitations are. And then try to understand that when you're drawing, you're going to be drawing within a budget of time and energy. So um, when I'm refining a picture or something, like in the previous YouTube video, um, I was thinking like, how much energy do I have, and how much refinement can I do before that energy sort of tapers out? How much time does the audience have? And I was thinking about that. So in order to get better without useless practice, uh, means that you just want to understand the processes behind them, behind what you're practicing and why. What is something that's related to speed, what's related to fitness, and what is related to just a general feel of mastery. So your speed, this is never going to be accurate. This is going to be loose. Like you're just going to say, okay, I've got this idea, this one core idea, and I'm just going to work around it. Okay, now we're just playing around this idea here. Like, what do we want to do with this idea? I don't know. But it's something like, oh, okay, it's a face. Do we want a downward face that faces down? Do we want a face that's like turned to the side, completely turned to the side, where it's looking that way? Or do we want the image looking to the side, but then facing downwards? Do we want that? Uh, or do we want it like slightly turned towards the camera as it's sort of faced down? And then you think like, okay, here's like a maniforce problem. I'm doing two things at once that I don't know how to do. So I'll create the form of the sphere of the head, and then I'll create the secondary form of the facial structure, and then the perspective as it drops off around the back. So kind of like, oh, okay, so now we've got kind of like a basis idea of that rotation and that orientation. So come across and down like this and ba-da-da. And so now you've got it looking down and looking towards you more, and maybe that's like the configuration you want or need for the picture that you want or the composition that you want. So speed would just be about realistically sketches. So let's not focus on Manaforce and fitness at the moment. Let's look at something like manga. Okay, so in manga, what I'm going to do is there's panels on a page, and in order to understand paneling and framing, you have to understand that there are different camera angles. So there's a pitch up camera angle where the horizon is going to be low and you're going to be looking up on someone. So there's going to be a perspective shift that goes towards a vanishing point somewhere high up. So, there's a person here and they're standing like this, like power posing over the top of you or whatever, um, doing whatever the heck they're doing. And they're going to be within this kind of framework. And so maybe this is a panel that you want, like you want an upshot to show that someone's powerful, or maybe you want a downshot to show that someone's small. So the horizon line is going to be much higher because you're taller than the figure. So where the horizon is, this is where the eye line of the subject is. So you'd be looking up at them because the horizon is down here. And if the horizon is up here, you're going to be looking down at someone because your eye line is probably above them. So if they're here, you can add like a perspective that causes them to shrink. So there's probably a vanishing point down here or something. And so they're probably going to have big wide eyes, like, oh my God, no, I'm sorry, like I mean to be doing whatever. I don't know why that looks like a pumpkin. I've just done just a million different lines there that just start to communicate a pumpkin. So, um, so I don't know, like maybe some like kid thing. It looks like a horrid little mummy kid. That's fine. You can always remove those kinds of things, but say like the shoulders sort of decrease and uh, there and whatever. Okay, it's kind of poor as an example. um, um, I don't know, give him some randomly spiky hair, I guess. Uh, I don't know, maybe he's like a kid that's kind of like talking, I don't know, nonsense. So you're looking down at him because your eye line is above. And so you've put like that perspective on and you've changed that. So this is kind of a speed thing where wherever you're doing a panel and you're making a decision as to what kind of drawing you're going to put on a panel, you have to decide the shot composition. So as a director, is this as an establishing shot? Where is the eye line for the audience? Is it midway? Is it a bottom third? Is it a top third? Is it higher? Is it lower? So are we pitching up? Are we pitching down? You're going to be thinking of those things, and that's going to require a lot of speed. And so you're just going to be making compositions that are based on the the rules of the camera um, in order to draw whatever you're drawing. So just thinking about an establishing shot, maybe you're overhead, and then the figures, I don't know, are going to be, um, I don't know, it's going to be like really distorted and not something you completely like recognize or whatever. Like maybe this is a windswept scarf, I don't know, and like that's the forward leg, and this is the second whatever head, and or maybe this is from deep below behind them, and they're on like a mountainside and there's like a wind coming through that's sort of hitting at them. So maybe you want to put like light up here, which then is casting this harsh, this harsh sort of landscape on them. And you like, okay, I like the idea of an establishing shot that has this kind of idea. And, down here in the valleys, we can actually establish, the place that they're going to or the place that they're actually in. And, you know, now I've got a design composition of this is taking up about a third of the page. This is taking up like 2/3 of the page, and this is a smaller design. And so you're like, okay, so that's a big, medium, small. I've got this compositional idea that I can use. So this is speed. And as you can tell, me going through all these things, you're probably like, what, why, what? But ultimately, what I'm doing is depending on what direction you want, like a facial structure to view. Uh, depending on the way that you want a scene to be represented, you have to then just consider the angles and the positions and whatever perspective you want to put on something. Perspective is just, I don't know. Everyone likes to say it's this thing where things go to a vanishing point. What I would say perspective is you just want to make sure that when you draw a face, that the eyes and the lips and the features are kind of like in a row, and that they will vanish to the right point. So any vanishing point is just anything other than parallel. So parallel a little bit in, parallel a little bit in, that creates a vanishing point all the way out here. And when you are actually studying things for vanishing points, you'll notice that vanishing points in reality are really small. They are only about this 5% sort of whatever. They're not like massive. What most people will do though is they'll make a vanishing point that's much more exaggerated. So, if they have, I don't know, subway or whatever, they'll make it much more of a massive perspective change than is in reality, um, because they're exaggerating perspective for effect. And you can also do that, like this is an exaggeration, this is an exaggeration. Um, but in reality, perspective change, it'll be pretty close to parallel. It'll just be like a little bit off, just like that 5% increment off. So perspective is it's just quite literally, it's quite complex, but if you rotate something in front of you, it shouldn't have like massive perspective changes. It should just be mostly the same, like just almost almost exactly straight, but just tiny tiny little turns in perspective. Like this is this rotated. And you can see there shouldn't be too much perspective distortion just because you've rotated in front of you, because you don't have perspective distortion happening like here either. Like, oh, this, yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about there. But basically, uh, let's actually go on to some perspective. So some perspective would be, okay, always view perspective as 3 sections of the page. So there's the central perspective. This one isn't going to have very much change or adaptation or whatever. Then you've got like a secondary sort of zone of perspective. So if you shift a box off to this side, there's going to be a shift of maybe like a half or like a third or something like that, because you're now viewing this box slightly from the side because it's away from the center line of your vision. And if you bring it down, it's going to be like a third, or it basically goes up to a half at the edge of the page, in realistic perspective. Um, so if you can just use that rule, so maybe it's a quarter here, um, or even a third or whatever. And when it's much closer, it's just going to be slithers. Like it's just going to be like a tiny little slither of the top that you see. You're not going to see most of the top. So when you're doing perspective, you just consider like, what's your focal point? Where are people's eyes at? Here's the horizon line in this situation. And then you consider that how far out from that is going to change the level that you see that distortion. So, and also when you get outside into this area, this is going to be blurry in most people's vision. So most people's vision isn't going to see to a perspective change that is like literally one half. They're not gonna Like it's very alien for people to see a perspective change this distorted, because your vision, while you can still see this in your eye, you're only going to be seeing it with one eye. This is with two eyes, and this is with one eye, because it's just outside of that focal length that you're designed to see. So you're not going to see those perspective changes that are that deep. You're going to just see maybe something that's like a third or so. So that's something with perspective, and you can also just think of the exact same thing that's perspective going this way, and third person perspective is just doing that either up or down, depending on whether you're going to be above the image, like say this image here, this is where its eye line would be, but your eye line is here. And because your eye line is above, that means you're looking down on it, which means you're going to see a bit of the top half. And there's another aspect of perspective that's super useful, which is that whenever you're drawing like a figure, like a body figure or something like that, or let's say this is a chest, um, your features should bend depending upon where your eye level is. So this is above me. So my eye line, like, I don't know, whatever, wherever it's sort of straight, this is kind of where the horizon line is. And at any other point, you're putting in a degree of features that start to describe, like there might be some, I don't know, wrinkle in fabric or something, and I don't know, whatever feature is doing something, and whatever the features you're drawing, and I don't even know what features I'm drawing here, but let's just say it's chest of some guy, because we don't want to be lurid here. Um, um, the features that stretch across the body, they need to rise at the midpoint and lower at the outer point in order for it to read as it having a degree of perspective, for you to be, for example, your eye line is down here and you're looking up at this person. And it would be the opposite if you're drawing below the eye line, where you would want the beats of the drawing. And beats is something that I take from story writing, where essentially any sort of feature or idea that you're using is going to take up a beat. And so you kind of then you just order these little beats um, in a way that makes sense to it being, you know, distorting from perspective. So this one, it's going to carry, and it's going to carry those details around that way. And this one's going to carry it like even deeper sort of change in perspective, you know? So, and you could have like a model doing a pose, like what are they going to do? I don't know, something that, you know, hand and whatever. That's very suggestive, but whatever. Okay. So perspective, you can just simplify it down, and it doesn't need to be super complex. But that's like a thought speed thing. You'll notice that I'm not being too attached. I'm not attaching myself. And so if you want to improve and get better so that your practice is better, you do need to reduce your dependency on being good. And you need to focus your perspective on being practical. So the idea of just a simple T form for a face to represent like the figure's direction of where it's looking, and using stroke lines effectively as you do that, and then constructing the form properly is much better than you actually trying to draw a face, because now you're going to transition using speed, and you're going to be less dependent on um, one configuration of what you're doing, and you need to be able to do multiple configurations. So this one, I said like, oh, I want it looking across. This one, I said I want it looking down, but looking back towards. Let's want something looking up, and let's say the face is actually turned away from us, so we're going to see more of the back of the head. And so the jawline is going to be through the head somewhere over there, and so ear is going to be off here somewhere, and this person is, I don't know, like there's some sort of hairline feature that distinguishes that we're looking from behind, as this person is sort of like, which way do we actually want them to look? Do we want it like that direction? And you can kind of search for or understand the way that you're representing something. Like, oh, let's make something look completely up, and make the top of the head here, and there you go. Or maybe you're going to rotate that head around so that it's maybe at this kind of angle, and you're going to put the sphere form of like the head along here, and then it obviously coming out of that sphere is where the jawline is going to start moving from, and then it's going to come out from that thing, and then it's going to have like a curve over the front of it, which brings it around, and there's going to be like connections to like the neck. So then you're like, okay, well, how do I figure out how I want to specifically subtract little aspects out of this form? Like, oh no, that thing, and how do I subtract like the actual aspect of the form here? Like, what do I do? You start to figure out like what it is that configuration is trying to say, and you kind of like figure it out. So maybe this idea is more for someone that's getting, I don't know, a hair bath or something, like they're getting their hair washed or something. So being able to jump in and out, developing different angles, like these look horrible. They don't look fantastic at all. That's speed. And you'll need to be able to do that so that when you're using shot compositions and you're designing a shot composition, or whatever that is, and maybe like even different shot sizes. Say something's more important. If something's more important and you want people to see more detail, make it bigger. If it's less important, just reduce it. And you want to reduce that within a certain range. So this is a design thing, but say some mangas might have like five panels, and the main, or 4 panels, 3 panels, maybe up to 6. Like they'll have a range of panels per page that they'll use. And so you'll have to decide what is most pressing. Like this is going to be the feature. This is going to be the feature of the scene. And this is going to have the most detail. This is going to have the most progress through it. So could you use something that has like a lot of progress through that scene? This one, it's bigger, so this is kind of an establishing thing for this specific sequence. And then this one is just an informational one because it's the smallest panel on the page. So this is just probably a transitional panel or something like that that gets us to the big moment, and then this is the aftermath, or maybe a different perspective on this. Um, so you want to understand that, you know, with your pages, you need to be fast enough to be able to jump in and jump out and jump in and jump out, so that you can start to redecide and reconfigure what specific thing is doing and why. Um, which sounds super complex, but and also there's things with speed, for example, like you don't know where this neck is going to go. So would you create a straight neck that goes down that way? Or would you create a bent neck that comes down this way? Uh, did you miss a feature? Does something describe it better? How do you, like, what kind of idea do you want to take inspiration from? Or are they, maybe they're in water. And so, like, their face is like half submerged in water, and so their hair has got to like flutter out this way and that way. And maybe now you've got to think about how the perspective and the composition of this drawing is going to represent what you want it to look like. And so then you might start thinking about, okay, so now their body is floating on top of the water as well. So being able to do that at speed is super important. Doesn't matter how pretty it is. You don't need pretty. And that's true of you even just beginning, because if you can calculate that your speed has increased, that you're not getting tired, that you're capable of just boom, bump, 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 doing something practical like shot design. For example, there could be a film, and you're watching the film and you say like, well, their shot design, they came from an over-the-shoulder shot, uh, like this or whatever, and the exact angle that they used had the form of the head turned like this, and then it was like much more forward like that. And so that we're only seeing like the front third of the face, and then, they're looking across like this, and this hood was kind of down like this, and so they're looking out at something, and the perspective was at their eye line because we're along with them, and I don't know, it was going down a street that had this perspective tilt to it, um, that made it so that we knew that there were like, I don't know, that there was distance or something. And, there was a little puppy that was looking up at them, and it was angled like this, and the head was angled up, and, it's got its cute little paw there or whatever, and like its waggly little tail, and it's just chilling there. And this guy's like, well, what am I going to do with this? I don't know. So you've maybe watched that film or that whatever, and now you've got this base idea of the concept, and you've accurately depicted the form, and you've speedily done it, and now you've got like a basis to work with to redesign or resculpt or even set up like how you're going to design the page, what the beats are, being able to analyze like, okay, so this is in a top third position, this is in a bottom third position. What is this composition? How am I going to use that or make that look interesting? This is also a top third, like where they're using this. So this is the medium of the shot. Maybe this is obviously the small of the shot, and this whole other area is the large of the shot. So what kind of texture am I going to put there? What kind of aspect has to be on this large part of the shot, because it's got so much of the focus of the shot is on this ground. So this is probably going to be telling a story, like whatever's on this ground part, it's going to be telling a story about this dog. and why we're looking at it. And so by being able to break things down like that at speed, that's going to help you achieve whatever your task is. So for myself, it's to be a manga artist, to be a storyteller. And so I need to be able to very quickly um, describe these kinds of things. And then sometimes, problem solve with a degree of force and focus. And so I'll practice that. So the internal feeling and the internal struggles you have are actually the guiding posts that help you understand if you're improving, how you're improving. Because if your speed increases and your force increases, then overall, what you then just need to do is you just need to be able to have extended periods of time where you're designing whatever you're designing. All right, let's stop doing faces. Let's start doing like a hand or something. Um, So with fitness, you'll start to notice this a little bit later in the process. Obviously, your fitness will be like super, super low initially. So it won't like you won't have any sort of way to argue with yourself to do something more or to spend a long time like developing something. You'll just be hard ruled out of whatever you're doing. And it's like, well, no, sorry, as much as you want to be drawing here, um, you just you're just not allowed anymore. You can't argue. You're done. So when it comes to fitness, the more speed and force you have, the more momentum you can throw at a task and then have it intimidate you less. And so you can then use that sort of speed and capability to make sure that whatever you're doing is like fit. Uh, that you're doing something that has a purpose or a design to it, a structure to it, a practicality to it, whatever. And yeah, so you like whatever you're doing, you can just keep doing it. That you can just keep flowing. That it doesn't stop you. Like you don't get to hiccups. You don't get to a stopping point. That you can keep pushing through. That is fitness. And if you don't have fitness, for example, when I'm doing like trying to create a manga, if I can't design even the concept phase just constantly like this, just constantly moving through whatever I'm doing and saying like, okay, that's one fist. Like, what's another fist? Let's make something in this direction, which then I don't know angles off like this. And then has like maybe the thumb is coming over the front. Okay. And then I don't know the thumb joint, and I don't know, it rotates, comes through like whatever. And even if you come up against problems, it shouldn't deter you to the point of saying like I'm going to quit, I'm going to give up, because if you do that, then that fitness is for nothing, because fitness is to get you through to the end of what you're doing so that you're able to complete things, so that you're able to push through difficult moments. And you're going to require a lot of force to do that as well. And so this is mostly mental. So most of the idea of drawing is a mental struggle with yourself so that you're not telling yourself like, oh, because the drawing isn't perfect, then I should give up or there is no progress here. It's just about, because you can always go back and you can say like, well, what's wrong with this hand? Why is this hand terrible? And obviously it's something to do with the thumb, but you can you can get reference if you really want to after the fact, and you can say like, well, maybe maybe it come, yeah, that's a terrible thumb too. So whatever, you can come back and get a reference for whatever it is that you're doing and make it better. It doesn't matter because later parts of your method or your process, they're going to they're going to be something um, that allows you to fix things that are broken. Just make sure they're not too broken, or make sure you've got that thing here, like this here is question mark. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that part. Okay, so we're going to come back, but it is a thumb, and from that angle, I'll need to take a look at, how that thumb joint works, or I'll have to use mana force, where I'll be like, okay, uh, mana force would be, all right, so what's this angle working at? It's working at this angle. Like, I think it's probably good for me to show you. So this is working at this angle, like this, sort of like that, right? Which means we're above this hand. So what is that? We'll look like above it, like here. Um, above that hand, it's coming off to the side. So it's not only that we're above it, we're also, our center line is like over here or something. So it's actually kind of far out from us. So our perspective can tell us a little bit about what's happening with this. So it's got this kind of perspective change, unless it's rotated away from us. Like if it was rotated in this direction, then this could be more in front of us, but it probably wouldn't be anyway. It's probably still to the side of us. So the structure of this hand is, it's bladed, so it's a thinner rectangle, um, and the width, I can just look at my own hand and I can say like, okay, the width of my hand is maybe a third of what the finger length is. So like even the first joint. So these are too short. So they need to be longer, um, even before bending, because if I don't do that, then there's not going to be enough room. Where does that go? It goes down this direction and this direction. Not going to be enough room for there to be a thumb. Okay, and then represent like it falling back like that. So then maybe the fingers don't go all the way back. Whatever. This is terrible, but it's kind of cool because it gets to show you, like you might need to problem solve something, might look terrible, horrible. And when we're thinking of a thumb, how does a thumb actually come off? It's actually off the side of the main uh, part of things, so it's not directly connected to it. It's like a secondary connection. And I look at the thumb and I say like, okay, if it's in that position, um, it's actually going to be facing us. in how it looks. So with this, the thumb is going to be directed towards us. And then the fleshy aspect is going to be here. And so, I don't know, maybe I can just get away with, I don't know, tightening this like this, and this, and this. And I'll do some erasing because you definitely can't see what I can see in it. Let's erase. So it's less turbulent randomness. But I do like kind of being turbulent and random. It's kind of nice. Because there's another principle that I might want to show you, which is Gestalt philosophy, or Gestalt, or whatever. Gestalt philosophy, which is the impact. Ugh, don't want to put that there. That's whatever. So this thumb is actually going to be bigger or something. I don't know. And then you can refigure that out. Like, what do you actually want here? Like, what is the actual design? So that then you can resculpt and rechange or shift something. All right. So Gestalt philosophy is that people's minds tend to close things. So even if I create like this, you can still see that that's kind of a circle. Or maybe we're doing a cylinder and then I just don't complete one aspect of it, and maybe this is partial and only this part has like depth or whatever. You're still going to complete the cylinder, and maybe these broken points are going to depict like light or thinness or something like that. So you can draw without drawing by understanding that the mind is going to close these gaps. It's also the same that when you put similar things next to each other, people are going to group this as an object. So I've put similar things here. People see this as a grouped object of this. Then they're not just looking at like the little dots, or they're looking at this as a collected whole. And with this one, where you've got this sequence of things, they're looking at this also as a line. So whenever you're drawing something, you want to understand that the Gestalt philosophy or perspective that someone has is that they're always going to complete something. So when I draw, and I'm just drawing an idea, I draw it in a Gestalt way, which just means horizon line. Okay, here's a mountain. Like, oh, what do you mean that's a mountain? That's just like a bunch of squiggliness that does whatever. It's like, okay, and what do we want here? Like a crag or a fissure that sort of comes up to the camera. Okay, so we just create like a fissure that kind of comes up to the camera and kind of creates a crag. Okay, I'm not thinking mountain. I'm just thinking, how does a person's mind complete this? And what do I need to put on the page as a minimum just to get the idea there, so that I now have like a vision of what's happening, which is mountains, sunlight, whatever. And now, this, you've got to darken this aspect and you've got to darken that aspect and darken this aspect, and there's going to be like some midpoint of this thing, and you darken this aspect behind it. You're going to get like there's interesting ways to make the mountain more realistic or cooler or whatever, because it's got more forms to it, more subforms, secondary forms. So, and depending on what your landscape is and like where did you want your person, it's like maybe they're just cut off on the side because they're like, just what the hell is going on? And there's just this expanse before them, and maybe they're looking at something over here, which is like, I don't know, you've got to come to this point, and it's just like, no, I don't want to go to that point. There's like a big fissure across here, and like maybe like roaming animals that are sort of striding along here somewhere, like with like a whippy tail and maybe these big wings. So this person's just like, no, I don't want to do that. That looks like a horrible idea. So you've created by speed and just by closure the idea of what this is. And I think it's Peter Travers. Peter Travers, I think his name is Peter Travers. Is like he does these amazing architectural drawings of like buildings and places, and he talks about how that he doesn't draw every detail of something like a pillar or whatever. Like let's just say there's like some roses that are on like the underside of some pillar type thing. He doesn't draw every single detail. So we're just going to be looking up at something, this kind of archway, and it's going to have some sort of tilted, ornate design that connects through kind of like some elven arch or something, like in some sort of French architecture, and be something back here like a pagoda, like a balcony or something that's kind of got like these rich tapestries sort of along that aspect of the I don't know, the handrail or whatever that is. And I don't know, maybe it's got like something on a trellis or whatever. But say the main focus or the larger part of it is here, and these are roses or something. So he won't necessarily create every detail of a rose. He'll just be like, okay, what's the main idea of the rose here? And I guess it has to do a spiral type thing, and like gain like a petal that then goes around, and then petal that goes around and a petal that goes around. And so he'll create the illusion that there is quite like, because people just see a rose from a certain configuration of ideas, he'll just do that. And oftentimes people will think that his whatever is super detailed, but it's not super detailed. I completely went the wrong direction with that one. But hey, it's good to have some mistakes there so that you can see them, right? Um, and so as he might like go back in the piece, there might be roses along here. And because he's established some roses in a little bit more detail up here, whatever, and I'll just do a quick thing here. And this is how you can draw everything, by the way. You can draw everything by just kind of half approximating the idea and sort of doing it in a squiggly fashion. If there's lines down, you can probably get away with quite a lot. Just because there's an effect of seeing something rather than just the actual detailed version of drawing something, because the actual detailed drawing of something is kind of tricky. And so you can give an effect that there's roses behind on this pedestal, just with like a central point and a little swirl around it. And I haven't even zoomed in. And it's like, okay, so in this drawing or whatever, he could potentially make something like he's more precise than I am. I'm like so loose in creating like effects. Because his is for a finished piece and mine is just for the silliest demonstration. And so he also says things, so for example, that the shadow shape is probably the thing that defines things that are far away, not the actual like measurement of the thing that you're doing. So like so long as the shadows have like a specific rhythm to them, so like they're happening in a certain frequency of beats, that you can just kind of use that um, to create the illusion that there is that depth um, in that scene behind. And obviously you can go in and you can re-sculpt something after the fact. I don't know, let's have some fake curtains or something. And that re-sculpting later, you just go in and you make the decision as to what needs to be there to complete things, to make it look, I don't know, the way that you wanted it to look. Here, and maybe there's like a hole that sort of comes through here, and maybe there's like a repeat ornate structure in here, you know, and then like there's winding staircases which come down, and like you got a staircase which then comes up, and there's like a trellis thing that goes along here and winds up to here, whatever. And you can draw scenes like this by using the idea of closure, because people, like this could be far away, this could be close, they're going to start to just create the details for themselves, even if you haven't fully given them everything. You just need to give them enough to give them clues as to what you're drawing. And you can experiment with that. Like just the idea of like, oh, okay, what do we want? We want a scene that drops back into perspective. Oh, a little zigzag. Whoa, that goes in a back perspective. And then you're like, oh, okay, I want the horizon line to be along here. Okay, cool. They can finish off the rest of this. Doesn't matter. Because we can have a boulder or something. No, maybe it's a castle. Let's say it's a castle, and like it's sculpted this way and sculpts back this way, and I don't know, like there's these high pillars that breach out that do something. I don't know that. What kind of castle is it? I don't know, but maybe these things have to like go off this way, and maybe I don't know, there's some bigger thing like Taj Mahal or whatever. And so, oh, there we go. We have some random half design. It's not a design because you're going to have to design it. You're going to have to re-sculpt it. You're going to have to say like, well, what do I actually want it to look like? What is the design of this? Where is this perspective going? You're going to have to ask those questions. But after you've answered those questions, then you can start even mocking up uh, the way that you want to specifically do your design and start to see like what effects you want. Like, do I want that like that? And does this really matter? Like, that doesn't work. Like, where do I bring this pathway? Do I bring it like, what's going on? There's an undulation down here. Like, this is the bottom of a hill, and then this seems to rise up to another hill, which then maybe that is obscuring like the actual entrance that leads here somehow. And so you can make more considerations per page because you're not expending effort on all these aspects that are critical to your design, because you're able to establish the effect, because people see similarity. Like even if this is dropping back like this, and you were to like and this here or whatever, people would start to see the similarity. Like this is ridiculous because I've got multiple competing images here. But similarity could be used to both tell you that this is the same thing as this thing, but also to tell you that these lines exist. So similarity and closure are probably the two strongest aspects of Gestalt, uh, whatever. And this is called continuity, by the way, this continuity. And Gestalt is spelled Gestalt, I think. I don't know, it's some German word. Or maybe it's like with just a G-E-S. I don't know. But you can look up that. Most people will just be telling you about similarity and stuff, so they won't really tell you much, but you just want to understand that you don't need every piece of detail, and it doesn't need to be accurate. You can just be blah. It doesn't matter. And this is the way that I describe this is like a restaurant. If you go into a restaurant, you're expecting a certain scene or whatever. I don't know, like something that happens off in the back, and maybe there's like some window around that does something, like I don't know. There's tables that do something, and like benches behind them that do whatever, and there's a perspective that comes towards you because I don't know, there's whatever, and there's like another table and uh, something along here that looks pretty-ish or whatever, and stuff behind people that sort of decorates along here, and then there's like maybe whatever. And we're a giant in this situation because our eye line is here and the roof is here. So I've messed that up, but hey, whatever. We're looking from a camera that's on the ceiling that's looking down at this. Let's just say that. So you've got this idea of what this restaurant is, and I don't know, candle or maybe like a flower or something. It's like a flower there or whatever. And there's going to be a waiter that's going to be striding through, and a person, you can just look at them as just a line. They're just a line, and I don't know, they just move through carrying something. Like what's the typical carry thing, like I don't know. And you can just, like when people paint, for example, they don't paint super accurately. It might just be something of a line, and maybe they're grabbing something on a counter here or something, and then you would like want to change, like, oh, here's the shoulder, and then here's like the front side, and then they're rotated this way, but their hips are like aligned across and away from things, and so they're sort of doing this and sort of striding forwards, like whatever they're doing, it doesn't matter. So you can get an idea of like, okay, the restaurant, the person comes, to serve your order. You have a seat. There is a view. There is something ornate happening above you or whatever. There's an entrance point that you've come through, but now you're kind of locked away from it. Whenever you're in a restaurant, you have certain expectations. So if you put down the certain expectations that people have of a restaurant, now it'll read as a restaurant, even though it's a blurry, stupid figure, not even a proper rectangle, just loads of squiggles. That chair is a squiggle. Um, these archways are probably not where the eye line should be, so whatever. The eye line's super high here, but whatever. Um, and so you've got something that you can work with as the first part of your sketch or method or design. And if someone's more inclined to put in like cleaner details of a clean sketch because they're actually pretty sure that this design is good, then they'll come in and they'll create like an actual construction of the forms. Maybe they'll create like even cleaner lines, like, oh, okay, so the cleaner line of this person is gonna do this because the form is actually doing this, and then I want them to be doing this, and maybe I want like an effect of like some clothing that does like whatever. So they'll come in, and depending on how much knowledge they have, they'll be able to fill in more details, more subforms, more of the stuff about perspective or whatever, and they'll be able to fill that in. But when you're first starting, you won't have that, so you don't need to pretend like you have that. Because ultimately, when it comes to drawing, you just want to be able to iterate quickly. Because if you can iterate quickly, you can come across all the happy accidents you want, and it can be really helpful and nice and enjoyable because you don't have to uh, like your practice. Most of your practice is going to be like bad anyway, and you know you want to get better and better as you narrow in on the refinement. There's a certain minimal threshold you want to hit for like the design. So the design base of a drawing. So the base of a drawing, you want that to actually be clean enough that you can actually use it. So for example, we're drawing a square here. This isn't a good base. Like the design, we know what it is. It's a square. The base, is this good enough? No. It's good enough for like the ideation, but it is not good enough for the base. So if you're going to create a base that you're going to refine, you don't want to refine this because then you're going to have a wonky square. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to chip away at it and say like, well, I want this to actually be kind of vertical. How do I want the other thing to come in? Oh, I want that to be actually horizontal. And if I wasn't lazy, I'd actually like lift my elbow and like actually try and get the line angle. And you'll look at things, you'll measure things, and then you'll decide on like the strokes that you'll do. You control the strokes better, and then you'll look at it and you'll say like, is this what I want? And you're like, no, it's still tilted, it's still not quite right. And you can use transform tools, you can use ruler tools, you can use whatever tools you need to help assist you to get the thing that you want because you know your design. And then you can say like, oh, okay, this square almost works for me as a base, whatever. And so maybe that's not good enough because it's like these lines, these thick lines, they have so much room for error. So maybe you want to like clean those up. Maybe you want to like zoom in and get the line that you want. That's going to depend on if this is for the base and if this is super important. If it's a super important detail, you want that accuracy, right? Because people are going to be looking directly at that. And as you refine, this is going to just multiply by like many times. Like it's just going to be doing this, but a lot more. But in your ideation, you can be as loose as you want. Like you'll see master artists, they'll just be like, what's the rhythm line here? And this comes across like this. And I'll use a stroke that does this. And maybe the shadow form, I'll just put that in with a bit of charcoal and just smudge this along here. Like, whatever. Because they're happy with their stroke. They're happy with the general outline of what they're creating. They know that you've got closure that's going to be pushing you to like see whatever you want to see. And so once they can see that on the page, they're like, ah, good. Because you don't just draw with your pen, you draw with everybody's eyes. Like we all have eyes and we all have this kind of gestalt way of closing things off. So you don't always draw with a pen. You sometimes have to draw with what happens, what the effect is. And what you'll notice is that really terrible drawings, as you develop them more, the effect will change and you'll get to a position where it actually starts to give across a good effect, and then it starts to look good. So an unfinished drawing where you're like, oh, this looks manky, um, like, wow, this is the mankiest drawing ever, and whatever, it's just unfinished because you can resculpt where this eye is and that eye is. You can rechange where this nose is. And maybe your style, you want it to look like this weird, wonky thing. And you can just say, like, okay, I do want this weird, wonky nose. And I do want like a sort of triangular mouth. And I do want like these beady eyes. And like that is the style of this cartoon. Um, and maybe I do want to give like a little bit of a hint of like facial structure. And maybe someone's cartoon actually has this kind of weird style. That's that's totally fine because when it comes to the style that you're developing, it it could be based on something silly. It doesn't matter. Like this silly. This could be a style. You could be like, all right, I'm gonna like create like dark stuff and then like cha 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 and like this and wow, whoosh 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 whoosh, and then it's like there's stuff happening here, and then don't you see there's this angle that comes down through the leg, whoa, and then this thing that does this, wow, look, it's like a ninja, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's like a spider kind of person now. Like you can you can make it so that whatever your random thing is, maybe that's an aspect of the style. And so when you design it and you're choosing what the base is, you might not want like a square. That might not be your design. Maybe your design is loose. It's a loose, squiggly, double image square. Maybe that's part of your design. So there's no point locking in something clean unless you have the design specifically in mind, because that might limit the way that you're creating whatever you're creating. And so there's a lot of freedom in the playground of art to do whatever you want initially, because it doesn't matter. You can improve things later. And it's just about when you do get fit enough to get to refinement stages, you can then take that refinement, make it better, and get to a point where people are like, oh, I actually like this artwork. This looks really nice to me. And so you don't need to do that right away. You just need to work on speed, enough speed so that you can go in and out and in and out. Then you want force. So you do want to measure things like, okay, here's a face. I want to get a reference. All right, we get a reference, blah, 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 whatever. And it gives like your specific form or whatever that you can do. And then you're like, how can I measure this? And then you solve some problems. Good. You worked on something, maybe you got a reference and you tied back and you solved problems by measuring. Excellent. Fantastic. Or you solved problems by creating forms that then like were the basis and the secondary forms. And maybe you thought about light direction as to where like the shadows go and where the turning points are on the form. Boom, force, fantastic. Or maybe you've thought about this side in conjunction with this side and how they conform together, like different parts of the relationship of the drawing, like how are they relating to each other? You're like, okay, that's force, boom. So you're stopping like this line, drifting away from this line. You're instead keeping the containment of like the way that you want them to talk to each other. Boom, you got more force. You're doing this over and over again, and you're not worrying, you're not like, dying of anxiety. Now you're getting a bit more fitness. And this is what I mean. This is a kind of like the sporty aspect of art. And this is what I'm kind of showing here is speed, force, fitness. I'm not showing you how to draw. I'm just showing you the basis of your general fitness routine that should be behind everything that you do, because it's not about how you draw a table. Like, oh, I need to learn how to draw tables. If I don't draw this table correctly, then the tables that I draw in the future will always be terrible. If you're thinking like that, that's a mistake. Because tables are easy to draw. It's just a form. It's just a form. And then what you're actually trying to do is you're trying to iterate different designs of tables. If that table doesn't work for you, cast that aside. Work another angle. Do I want it working this perspective? Do I want like to show at least half of the length of the table, because it's like so low, or whatever. Like this is actually a long square table, but we're viewing it from above, so it looks like this. And there's a chair here and a chair here and a chair here that describes that this is actually a square table. So, and then that describes the perspective accurately, the way that you wanted it to, or whatever. So that is as much about speed to get this right, as it is the force and the measurement. Like, okay, so is this half? Let's see. So this is like this big, and if I change that, that's like that big. Yeah, that kind of is half. So I did halve that, whatever, and maybe it shouldn't even have that much perspective change. It should just be kind of like a slider perspective change, because in reality, you don't have that much of a vanishing point. like, and literally how I figured out perspective is I bought a Rubik's Cube and then I rotated in front of my face and then off to the left side of my eyes, the right side of my eyes, up above me, down below me. And you can just figure out perspective by using a Rubik's Cube. I also use a slinky, so I have a slinky and I can just pull it out, push it in, and that helps me get all my foreshortening ideas and understanding how that works because you can just take a look. Um, and it's okay to do searching. That's speed. Uh, Force is when you're probably going to be like, I've got to organize this line and this line and this line simultaneously. How they're going to work together? How does that look? Does that fit well? And you're going to be problem solving the configuration of things so that they work together well. Because if you're doing this and this and this and this is this is drifting. This is probably also drifting. This is in the wrong position. This curve is sort of bent wrong. You're going to have to use force to problem solve that. Like, okay, if I solve this part of the face being better, now this drift is worse. This drift is worse. This is worse. So how do I fix that? Maybe I have to actually redesign this better part of the circle to reconfigure it, and then maybe I have to redraw this line so that I get the right line, and then maybe the eye, maybe it needs to be lower and it needs to be more circular, and this one needs to be a similar circle to this one. So how do I measure that appropriately and then do that? That would be your metaphors, because now you've got like an actual circle that you can tie in to your design that has a circle and a circle that has like let's say like a mouth that does this simple slot mouth. And yeah, this looks like he's beat up, but you just remove the beat upness that's making it look crazy and get closer to like the expectation that people are expecting to see, and it's going to look a little bit more like you designed it to look like. So I hope that makes sense, that drawing, in order to get better at it, you don't need to draw something amazing. You just need to start to get an idea of design. Your strokes need to help you so that you can actually create a stroke if you want. And when it comes to forms, you want that to be able to help you undo problems. And yeah, this is like an anxious face. He's just anxiously smiling. uh, I'll give it like a little shaky iris. Like a thumbs up. So yeah, if your fitness and your force and your speed increase, then you're going to be able to do whatever you like. And so it's not going to matter about whether you can draw a mountain or not, or whether you can draw a lake or not. It's going to matter that you are able to iterate rapidly, that you're going to be able to start to select the design that you want, that you're going to be able to measure the aspects that you want, that you're going to be able to relate that back to a reference, and that then you're going to be able to accurately come to a solution that is going to give people the effect that you want them to have, and hopefully with the style that you've selected for it. Because if you don't know what the style is, this is going to be tricky to create something that you really like, that's really fits your imagination. And in your imagination, everything is squiggly. There is no direct form. So you could say anything that you draw is like perfectly drawn from imagination, but you know in your heart it's not. You want it to hit that design idea, that feeling that you had. And so in order to hit that, you need to be fast. You need to, at times, apply like force and focus, and you need to be continuous in your process so that you can be fit and develop things. And I know this is like super messy, but that's this kind of artist that I am, is I start off messy and loose because I want to just feel things. And I'll just use the intuition in my arms as well, in the strokes, relaxing, feeling things, because just doing that allows me personally to just kind of, I can look at different features and imagine them as different pieces of the puzzle. What's happening here? What's happening here? What happened here? I don't know. What happened there? And you can start to use these as like ways to configure things, search for things, understand things. So I'm not saying everyone should do this sort of thing. That's silly. You don't need to. That's not necessary. But just focus on getting your speed up, getting the kind of force and focus aspects up, and especially form and measurement. These ones are very connected to force. Speed is going to be multiple versions, so orientation and like perspective. And then when it comes to fitness, this is going to be method. Um, so the method that you go through, all the different like refinements, and also to some extent design is going to be fitness, because it's going to take you time to find what your design is, but also it's going to take you some force to equal out what your design is, and it's going to take you speed to give you enough ideas to select what your design is. And essentially, at the heart of all drawing is your design. Because if you can't figure out a good design, you're not going to create something that has a good effect or has a good feeling, or the style that you're using, no matter how cool it is, if the design is like poor, it's not going to look good. Even if you draw it well, render it in well, the design's not going to be good. And there's going to be storytelling that comes into design as well, and how you're doing that, and the amount of beats that are involved, and how you're doing that. Like beats in design might be like big, medium, small, and those are just 3 beats that have a thing. But then there might be sub beats that have like whatever that's happening um, in those whatever. So your design and understanding design is going to be the most important part of drawing. It's also the most important part of writing is your design. I mean, most people will like world build, which is like speed, and force is like how you're telling the story, like what the sequence of events are, what each character does, and how they have different voices. Like they should all have different voices and communicate differently, move differently, have different gestures and stuff that suits them. And they shouldn't blend into each other. If they blend into each other, that's a bad application of force. It's just drifting. That's like a face drifting, the eyes coming off, and like the face is over here. So you don't want you want the force to be good, and the speed, you want to be able to do that like rapidly, create the story, because then you can create much more story. You want it to be vivid almost instantly from how you're drawing it and so on, which is just about like that restaurant scene where you draw like schemas and stuff. And then the fitness is being able to continue. So most people can't finish a book, or they can't finish a scene or a chapter or an episode, and you want to work up to just finishing off an episode, or you want to work up to finishing off a manga page, or maybe two, or maybe three, and maybe you're just trying to get them so that they have designs, not trying to refine them. You just like, what is the actual design of this first page? And once I have the first design and like the panel structures and the camera point of views, and how we're shifting directorially and doing the thing, and you're like, okay, this represents it well, and I think we're going to use this design. And before you render it, you're probably going to take that design and you're going to take it to someone and you're going to say like, what do you think? Like, I'm not even writing a letter there, or whatever. And they're going to be like, do I like this design? Do I not like that design? I don't know. And then, you'll kind of figure out over time like what designs are nice and how you like those designs, and then you'll go into refinement, and that will use your method uh, to develop it further, if that makes sense. So I know there's a lot of squiggling, but I hope this helps, because a lot of people will say you need to grind. You need to practice every now and then, like probably every couple days or so. But I would say you always want to think about it, be thinking about design or form or measurement as you're walking down the street, and sort of just be like, so this one works this way, and this thing has this form, and this thing moves like this, and I notice it has this effect that does this thing, and then there's always this structure that comes across here, and you know, you can also play around with your strokes and your stroke language to create like schema, like, oh, when I stroke like this, it sort of always looks like that. And then like, it seems very unorganized, but you just want to focus on those main principles, so that you can develop those, because they're what's going to matter in being able to design what you want to design. And once it's designed, you can refine it, and then it's going to be there. And that's like the heart of drawing. The heart of drawing isn't, oh, your sketches look so clean and amazing. That's impressive. That's impressive. I still look at some people's clean drawings and how they do that, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Maybe I'd like to do that. But what I want to do more is to be able to story tell instantly, instantaneously. What's happening? Where's the scene happening? What's the thing doing? What are the features in this scene? What are the story aspects? How am I creating this design to have a certain effect? Like, what's going on? If I can control those and I'm fit enough to do it, then I can create manga page after manga page after manga page after manga page with a good enough design that if I want to, I can get other people to help fill in the refinement process. Or I can do it myself. It depends what you want to do, in speed and force. And because you need these aspects, even if you're not going to be the final illustrator, you need these aspects. And I'm a writer, so I've been writing for, I don't know, like 15 years, maybe longer than that. So my writing is much better than my drawing, and oftentimes I use these principles, um, and design and art and I use the artistic idea of schema and so on to create the world that I'm creating. So I might describe like a bit of the world here and a bit of the world there and a bit of the world here. And I know that people are going to triangulate and they're going to start to create like the bigger sequence of what's going on. Their imagination is going to close off these details and they're going to, you're going to see so much more. So I used to have problems when I was writing, just I would explain everything that they're meant to see, and that's not the way that you want to do it, because it becomes really blocky and whatever. And then sometimes I'd forget to explain something, and then it would just be in a complete void and stuff like that. So there's design elements of drawing. They exist also in writing, and that's kind of cool too. So, but if you want to improve, um, like I said with the other one, where you've got stroke and you've got measurement and form, um, and you've got method and measurement. Um, you want, and then eventually there's refinement stages and so on, which is where shading and lighting and all that sort of, and color comes in. Um, once you've once you've developed enough of that, sufficient amounts of that, you're going to have confidence that you can take things from the start point to the end point. And so then you just need to be fast. Then you just need to be nice and efficient with where you need to apply force to fix things. And then you need to be really fit in making it to the end goal as quick and as nice and as smooth as possible, where you have the design, you have the structure in mind, you have the setup, and you are practically in a position to then create the refined version to finish it off, or even to pass it off to someone that can finish it off. So ultimately, there's a kind of a business or a production side to how you want to even be learning. The production side is like, do you want to be a workhorse or do you want to be a director? Do you want to be a person that edits something that and reconstructs it? Or do you want to be the person that has the stylistic understandings, the understanding of like the appreciation of specific parts? So let's actually put that in. So you've got the stylists over here. These are often like your experienced artists and stuff. They're gonna compose like what the style of the projects should be, and help finish it off when it's sort of done in like its final refinement phases. You're gonna have the directors that work directly um, alongside like writers and stuff, that are going to be thinking about shot composition, um, the perspectives, the angles, the pitch angle, the cameras, the lenses that you're going to be using. They're going to be doing that. They're going to be thinking about pacing and structure and how many shots they want, whether they want an over the shoulder shot or whether they want two figures talking directly to each other, whether they want a single face close-up shot where a person is like whatever. They're going to have to get enough takes of what they're doing, like on camera, and with enough stylization that they can create a movie from it or create a project from it. Then you've got the editors who can look at pacing and stitching the time frames together and understanding the nuances of little connective pieces, like, oh, okay, so this one's this big, and then this other one we're going to create in a very small panel frame that comes down here because it's going to do this thing exactly that does this. And they're going to edit everything, crop everything, understand the composition and the compositional flow of timing and so forth. Like in movies, it'll be like the sound design mixing with like the visuals and the music, and then at what point which one transitions into another, creating a flow that moves you through what's happening and makes it very clear and easy to understand. So you've got editors. They're people that, like, once they've got the director's cuts, they're going to start using and selecting it. You've got workhorses. So this might be like an actor or something like that. They might actually be a stylist that's sort of recreating things, but more often they'll be like a workhorse where you're telling them to do this shot, do this thing, change this, change that. This is all about like speed. Like they need to get speedy and they need to be really fit because you're going to be telling them to do stuff, do this, change this, alter this. Like your concept artists, they're going to be workhorses. You're going to like whip them, do this thing, right? And they're going to be doing a lot of the hard yard work, struggle stuff. There's also going to be some force in here for some of the work horses that are like, your second line of defense. You're going to actually like this dude did a concept art, it was all right, but now you're the manager here and you've got to like make that so that his proportions aren't randomly off and that the perspective matches the background. Okay, that's your job. So there's the workhorse aspects of drawing. And then you've got stylists. These people are the ones that are saying like, okay, with these directorial things, editing things, workhorse things, like we know what resources we have here and with this, and how are we going to whip this into like just a beautiful style? Like, guys, you need to do this with this thing. Guys, you need to do this with this thing. Guys, you need to do this with this thing. And if you're stylist, like your art director, they're going to take into consideration everything that's happening here. They're going to think about the different styles that are within the medium, within the trend, within the genre, and they're going to be asking what kind of thing are we creating here? What is our audience wanting? And so they're going to like veto some of these things. Like, no, stop these things, stop those things. And if you have a good art director, that's going to create something really genuine. If you have a poor art director, it's going to create something really hacky. So you want to be probably a good stylist in yourself. Like you want to develop that over time. You want to develop yourself as a director. You want to develop yourself as an editor. Like when you're doing the refinement process, when you're doing method, you want to get better at that. Sometimes you want to be capable as a workhorse. What you don't want to do is to learn art and say, hey, I've got big question marks. How do I do it? How do I do it? I don't know. And then people point down at you and say, practice. Because if you do that, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what this whole purpose of everything is for. And that means that you're never going to improve. Like you're never going to become like someone that's editing well or directing well or styling well or being a workhorse properly or putting on those different hats. Um, so it's not about the drawing. Like drawing is just, like I said, stroke, method, or method, measurement. And you could have different things here. Like they don't have to be the same ones as I have. It could be in form. And you just using these, um, and that allows you to develop whatever you're developing. You develop the thing, develop the designs, and then you've got your design. And once you've got your design, you're pretty much good to go. You then need to just learn some refinement skills like texture editing or specifics of shadow and light or specifics of color, color theory, and so on, and how you're dealing with that. But that's kind of like heady stuff. Like, huh? How do I exactly do that? Which you're always going to be questioning and stuff because maybe you do want to be more of a stylist and you think about that kind of thing. Um, but you've also got other things like directors aren't going to think about that sort of stuff. They're going to think about the shot composition. So they're going to think more like photographers are going to think. So, this composition does this thing, and then we're going to come from this shot angle doing this thing. And your editors, they're going to think about like the way that everything stitches together. And the workhorses, they're just going to do what they're told. And you do need to do what you're told sometimes. Like you just need to get certain things down. But that's why I say you can be loose. Because if you're loose, you can do the workhorse things really quick. Because the workhorse things, like if you're in a company, they're probably going to like be like, oh, I don't like the fact that you've just like done a concept art which says this. Like this is stupid. But for you, if you can see it, if you can see what this actually is and you understand it, then you're like, yes, I have this. I know what this is actually talking about. So when I do like a structure or whatever, it reduces how much workhorse stuff I have to do. And you may need to do workhorse stuff, but maybe you want to do that at the end part of your method where it counts the most, where you have form, where you have your forms, you have the design, and you have like all the measurements and all that sort of stuff, and you have all that down. If you have that down and at the end part of your method, this comes online and it happens just like you had in your mind's eye, boom, that's what you want. So this is what I'm talking about with drawing. So people talking about practice, endless practice. What are you practicing? You're trying to get better at being a workhorse or stylizing? No, it's a much more heady, theoretical, and advanced topic to start considering things. Drawing isn't just drawing something. If you want to draw something, just focus on measurement, focus on stroke. You can draw anything with just good enough stroke and good enough measurement and good enough understanding of form and maybe even an understanding of what the design the person did is. You just take their drawing, you take your canvas, and then you measure and you connect the form, you connect the design aspects, you use good strokes, and you're going to come up with something good. That is, you can learn that in like 3 months. You don't need to spend forever thinking about how you're going to be a great artist. Being a great artist, being an artist, means that you need to be able to fulfill different roles that are required for whatever your project is. And that's the truer understanding of drawing. So I hope that helps. And yeah, thanks for listening. Have a good one.